Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and in Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Chaf Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Erev Shabbos, and we're embarking on a new Siman today, Siman Reish Nun Gimel. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanasunim Batzar Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yotziem Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'Oiro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala Uvizman Kariv V'Neimar Amen. Our learning should also be a schus refuah shalema for David ben Belima, who is in need of Rachem Shamayim, and also should serve as a schus for a dear friend of mine who is going through a tzara. The Rebbeinu Shalom should give him the hatzalah that he needs. Embarking on Siman Reish Nun Gimel, we are now going to begin learning the sugya and the halachos of bishul. The Paitan says on Rosh Hashanah, I think it's in the psicha of Chazara Sashatz on Rosh Hashanah Yom Aleph, not 100% sure, but the Paitan begins and he says, Yaresi b'ftzoisi siach lahaschil. Yaresi, I'm afraid, b'ftzoisi, when I open up my mouth, siach lahaschil, to begin to speak. That's how I feel when we embark on learning the halachos of bishul. It's I really want to extend a heartfelt tefillah to the Rebbeinu Shalom. This is the tefillah that we say every day when we go into the Bismedrash to learn. I shouldn't say anything that ends up being a takala, that becomes a stumbling block, that somebody chas v'chalila does something which is aser. I shouldn't make a mistake in the halacha. I shouldn't say on anything that's tamei that it's tar. Mispal to the Rebbeinu Shalom that I shouldn't make a toyus. I shouldn't say something which is not accurate, and somebody will then chas v'chalila take that and run with it and do something on Shabbos that is actually aser. I implore the olam that this is a Dirshu Bahalacha shir. It's a shir that moves rather quickly through very complex material. I remember when I was writing for the Daily Dose project for Art Scroll, I wrote the halacha portions of much of the Daily Dose project, and I always pointed out that the purpose of the project was to be ma'ur, to educate people to what constitutes a shaila. People should have a basic understanding of halacha and at least be able to recognize, wait a second, there's a shaila over here, and then go bring that shaila to a rav. I implore the olam, bishul is one of those areas of Hilchos Shabbos that we deal with just about every single Shabbos. And I implore the olam, listen to this year, become cognizant of the different various issues and problems that could come up. And when something happens, if you have a shaila and you're not sure if something is mutter or aser, bring it to your rav. Go ahead and ask a shaila. Okay, with that hakdama in mind, let's take a look here at the subject matter. Siman Reish Nun Gimel, din kira v'tanur, the halachos that apply to a kira and a tanur. These are various types of stoves / ovens / cooktops. Litein aleha hakteros, the question of placing a pot onto the top of this tanur or this kira on Erev Shabbos, ubay he seifim, and here we have 5 seifim. Now, when we discuss bishul, we're discussing one of the lamites malachos. Cooking is one of the lamites malachos. Cooking is something that took place in the Mishkan, and therefore it is one of the lamites malachos. Very high level, what is the malacha of bishul? People translate bishul, they say right away, what do you mean, what is bishul? Bishul is cooking. Well, that's a very loose translation. Really, if I had to define bishul, I would say bishul is when you change something through the application of heat. So the very simple example of bishul would be, you take raw, inedible chicken, you put it into the oven, or you put it into a pot with other ingredients, with water to make soup. You put it on the fire, and you change the chicken from being raw, inedible chicken to being delicious, edible chicken. So you're affecting a change in the raw chicken through the application of heat. You have vegetables in your chicken soup, you're changing the vegetables. Even, let's say, a carrot. A carrot is something which is nechal chai. You can eat a carrot when it's raw. You can eat a carrot when it's cooked. But a raw carrot is very hard and difficult to bite. If it's a nice, good, thick, sweet carrot, you put it in the pot, you cook it with your chicken soup, you make it nice and soft and sweeter. So again, you're affecting a change in the carrot through the application of heat. Now, you could do the same thing with inedible products. So let's say for some reason you want to melt wax. You need melted wax. Or let's say you want to melt the wax off of something that it's stuck to. Maybe you take a look and you see that your kais has melted wax on it from Havdalah, and you want to get the melted wax off. So you want to take heat, you want to apply it to the wax, and you want to melt the wax so that it should run off the kais. Guess what? That would be bishul, because you're affecting a change in the wax, a beneficial change. You're affecting a change in the wax through the application of heat. So that also would be bishul. So this is just kedai. As we go into Siman Reish and Gimel, we have to have a basic understanding of the malacha of bishul. Now, also, when we deal with bishul, we're generally dealing with more than one of the lamites malachas. We're dealing with the malacha of bishul itself, but typically we're dealing with another malacha, and that is the malacha of havara, the malacha of making a fire. Making a fire is also one of the lamites malachas. In a typical situation where you want to cook, so the first thing you do is you make a fire. Then you take the raw ingredients and you put them on the fire. And now you're all set up to do bishul, to do cooking. So very often, typically, when we deal with bishul, we're dealing with both bishul and also havara. Theoretically, if you could get around both the havara shaila and the bishul shaila, then whatever you're doing should be mutter on Shabbos. What would be such a case? Very simple. Let's say you have a pre-existing fire. You left your fire on before Shabbos. So you have a fire. Your fire is going. You don't need to adjust it. You're not going to make it higher. So there's no havara over here. You have a fire. It's going. No isser malacha in that. Now you have food that's fully cooked. So you made chicken soup on Erev Shabbos. You made chicken soup on Thursday. You put it in the refrigerator. It was in the refrigerator all Thursday night. It's stone cold. But you want to eat it on Shabbos. So you want to come home from shul. You want to go to the refrigerator, take out your stone cold chicken soup, and you want to put it on a pre-existing fire. Well, if the chicken soup is mavushal kol tzarchai, if this is something which is completely and totally cooked, and you have a pre-existing fire, so really you don't have any bishul, you don't have any avara. So technically speaking, on a midaraisitic level, one would think that this should be mutter. Yet, we're going to see that it is absolutely not mutter. And as we go through here, we'll see why. Another point. We just went through an entire Siman Reish Beis. And in Siman Reish Beis, the Mechaber gave us example after example after example of the same concept. The concept was, you're allowed to put a malacha into play on Erev Shabbos. You're allowed to perform a pu'ula on Erev Shabbos, which is going to cause a malacha to take place on Shabbos. So, for example, the Mechaber told us, you're allowed to take grapes or olives that are completely uncrushed. You're allowed to load them into an olive press or into a wine press on Erev Shabbos, and then you're allowed to load the beam with the weight onto the uncrushed olives, onto the uncrushed grapes, right before Shabbos, and walk away knowing that the schita, one of the lamites balachas, the squeezing of the produce, is going to take place on Shabbos. And the grapes and the olives are going to become squeezed, and the oil and the grape juice are going to come out of the fruit on Shabbos. Why? Because you're doing a pu'ula on Erev Shabbos. Your pu'ula is 100% mutter. It's Erev Shabbos. There are no yisurim. The malacha is taking place in May Eleha. The malacha is happening, so to speak, of its own volition, without your active participation at all on Shabbos. You're not achroi for that. The pu'ula that you did was on Erev Shabbos. Bearing that in mind, were somebody to ask you the following shaila: can I take raw chicken, raw carrots, raw potatoes, raw onions, I'm not going to go weiter because I don't want to give away my recipe for chicken soup. Take all these raw ingredients, put them into the pot with water and spices, put it on the fire 2 minutes before Shkia, turn on the fire 2 minutes before Shkia, and walk away. You're doing a pa'ula on Erev Shabbos. You're lighting the fire on Erev Shabbos. You're putting the raw ingredients on the fire on Erev Shabbos, and the bishul is going to take place on Shabbos. L'chayra, against the backdrop of Siman Reish Nun Beis, you would walk away and you would say that l'chayra that should be mutter. Yet we're going to see that it's aser midrabanan. Now, one of the main reasons why this is aser midrabanan is because of a gzera, which is known as shema yechote bagacholim, lest you come to stoke the coals. What are we talking about over here? Well, if you would put up a raw chicken soup on Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, and you want to go to shul, and you're going to have a beautiful davening, and maybe the Rav is going to speak for 10, 15 minutes between Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv, and you're going to schmooze on the way home, and then you're going to come home. So you have some time here before, right? But you're putting it on 5 minutes before Shkia. You're not going to daven Ma'ariv until the Zman. So let's say you're not going to daven Ma'ariv until 45 or 50 minutes after Shkia, right? Then you're going to come home. You can have an hour and a half, 2 hours till the Suda. That's really enough time, especially if you have one of these stovetops that have powerful burners. You have enough time to make a chicken soup, right? But what happens if you walk into the house after davening and you see that the flame wasn't high enough? And now you were expecting that the pot would be boiling like anything, and now it's only going at a light simmer, and now suddenly you're worried maybe you're not going to have chicken soup for the Friday night Suda. So now there's a worry that you might come to raise the flame. Or back in the day, when they didn't have gas stoves, Shema yechote bagacholim. Maybe you're going to go stoke the coals. Anybody who uses a good old-fashioned charcoal barbecue or a smoker, you know that you have those coals burning. After several hours, they start to get ashed over. If you want to get them hotter, you stoke them up. You expose them to air, you aerate them, you shake the ash off of them, and now suddenly it gets a lot hotter, and now your pot starts cooking faster. Now, to stoke the fire, you're going to be over on two isurim, pashtus. One is havara. You're stoking the fire, you're making the fire bigger. So that's the isser of havara. Also, if you're accelerating the cooking process, you're also over on the isser of bishul. So, even though against the backdrop of Reish Nun Beis, it would sound like to put the pot on the stove right before Shabbos and let it cook on Shabbos should be mutter, we have this problem of shema yechote bagacholim. Now, we call this concept in halacha, this shaila, of putting the food on the stove on Erev Shabbos and allowing it to cook on Shabbos, this is what's known as שהייה, allowing the pot to wait, allowing it to sit on the stovetop on Shabbos. And we're going to be discussing when is שהייה mutter, when is שהייה aser. Okay, now that I've given you all of that information over here, let's dive right away into the Mishnah Berurah. This is one of those simanim where the Mishnah Berurah gives us a beautiful hakdama to the siman. We're going to begin with the Mishnah Berurah's hakdama. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Hine, mipnei shahasiman hazer rabu pa'orosav. This siman has many pa'orosav. What does the word pa'orosav mean? So interestingly enough, I don't remember off the top of my head which daf it's on in Baba Basra, but I think those that are learning Daf Yomi already have this. And that is a word in the Gemara. It's on the top of an Amud Aleph. Pa'ori. Pei Aleph Reish Yud. Hadar Pa'ori. It will regrow. I believe that Daf Yomi already did the sugya of Chardal. It's all the way at the end of the sugya of Chardal, on the top of Amud Aleph. Hadar Pa'ori. It will regrow. So Pei Aleph Reish Yud means to regrow. I believe that the word over here, Rabu Pa'orosav, means that this siman has a lot of outgrowths. There are a lot of tentacles. There are a lot of details that come out of this siman. So says the Chavetz Chaim, Memnei Hashimin Hazeh Rabu Pa'orosav, since this siman is very detailed and there's a lot that comes out of it. Ukidei shelo yivalbal einei hakoyrei bo, so that the eyes of the one who is reading this siman, should not become confused. Amarti, I said to myself, says the Chavetz Chaim, laha'atik mi sefer machzis hashekel, to take from the machzis hashekel in the Shulchan Aruch, psicha ketana, a short opening, a short preface, eleha, to this siman, me ikrei adinim shala, to bring out the main concepts of this siman, kedei sheyorotz hakoyrei bo, so that the reader should be able to move swiftly and easily through the siman. I love the way the Chavetz Chaim says that. I think we're still not going to move necessarily swiftly and easily, but definitely against the backdrop of the Chavetz Chaim's Hakdama, it will be much easier. Da, you should know, says the Chavetz Chaim, sheyesh inyan שהייה ve'inyan חזרה. There are two concepts in halacha when it comes to bishul that we're going to be discussing primarily over here in Siman Reish Nun Gimel. That is שהייה, which I already mentioned to you, and חזרה, which literally means returning. Let's see what this means. שהייה mikri, שהייה is called, says the Chavetz Chaim, shenoisen tafshil me Erev Shabbos al gabe kira, where you take something that you want to cook. You take a tafshil, you take a cooked dish on Erev Shabbos, and you place it al gabe kira. You place it onto the cooktop. Loy derech hatmana. You're not insulating it. Hatmana is insulation. We're not talking here about the shaila of hatmana, wrapping pots in things to either keep them warm or make them warmer. We're not dealing with hatmana over here. So what's שהייה? שהייה is where you want to take the tavshil, you want to take this dish, and you want to put it on the cooktop on Erev Shabbos, loy derech hatmana, without involving hatmana. And now you're going to leave it on the stovetop. So you're putting it on the stovetop before the beginning of Shabbos, and you're leaving it on the stovetop into Shabbos. Shabbos, and now on Shabbos, noitel mehakira, you want to take it off the stovetop to eat it. So that's שהייה. שהייה is you're putting the food onto the cooktop before Shabbos. You're leaving it on the cooktop going into Shabbos, and at some point on Shabbos, you're going to take it off the cooktop to use it. That's שהייה. The chazara mikri, what's chazara? Kishehenicha me'erev Shabbos al gabe kira. The shaila of chazara is, again, you put food onto the cooktop on Erev Shabbos. Ub'Shabbos noitlei mehakira. On Shabbos, you took it off the stovetop. So on Erev Shabbos, you put your cholent on the stovetop. On Shabbos by day, in the morning, it's time to eat the cholent. You took the cholent off the stovetop, and you took cholent, and you ate cholent. Now you want to be machzir it. Now you want to return it to the cooktop so that it should be hot, so somebody who wants to eat cholent by shalosh shudas could eat cholent by shalosh shudas. That's the shaila of chazara. So there are two shailas we're going to be dealing with here. We're going to be dealing with the shaila of שהייה, and we're going to be dealing with the shaila of chazara. Says the Chavetz Chaim in the brackets over here, what I just defined as chazara, zehu ikar din chazara l'kulei alma. This is the ikar shaila, the ikar case of chazara, according to all opinions. Aval yesh oid inyan chazara. There's another type of chazara. There's another shaila of chazara, which is shenoitloi me Erev Shabbos samach lachashecha. There's another shaila, and that is you put the food on the cooktop on Erev Shabbos, and then right before Shabbos you took it off, umachzira, and you want to put it back. Kamavur b'sif beis bahagah. We're going to discuss that in a later shir in Sif Beis in the words of the Rama. So here we have the Mishnah Berurah has already defined for us the ikar two shilas and halacha that we're going to be dealing with here in Reish Nun Gimel, the shaila of שהייה, which is putting food on the stovetop on Erev Shabbos and allowing it to stay on the fire on Shabbos. That's one idea, one concept we need to discuss. And chazara. Chazara is, it was on the cooktop on Shabbos, you took it off, and now you want to put it back on Shabbos. Obviously, chazara is going to be the more chomer dika shaila of the two. By שהייה, you're not putting anything on the fire on Shabbos. You put it on the fire on Erev Shabbos. The shaila is you put something on the fire on Erev Shabbos, you want to leave it there on Shabbos. Chazara, you're dealing with something that was removed from the fire. Now you want to put it back on the fire on Shabbos. that's going to be a bigger shiloh. So here we have the two shilohs. Now we're going to pay attention more to the shiloh of Shehiyah. When it comes to Shehiyah, says the Chavetz Chaim as follows: Upligi Chananya v'Rabbanon. We have a very major, heavy-duty machlokes of Chananya and the Chachamim. This is in Masechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis. We have a very major machlokes when it comes to the shiloh of Shehiyah between Chananya and the Chacham. The Chananya Sfirale, Chananya holds. Im hatavshel kvar nispashel kemeichel ben drusoi. If you have food that's already cooked to the point where it's edible, it's minimally cooked, which we call in halacha kemeichel ben drusoi. Ben drusoi was a ganef. Why he was Zoicha, that we should always talk about him in the context of Erev Shabbos, I'm not sure. But we always do. Kemichael ben Drusai. Ben Drusai was a bandit. And because he was a bandit, he was a fugitive from the law, he was always on the lam. He was always on the run. And because he was always on the run, he didn't have time for a well-done steak. He made a fire, he put his steak on the fire. As soon it was basically minimally edible, he yanked it off the fire, he ate it, it was time to move on. So Chananya says, if you have food that is nispashel k'meichel ben drusai, which the Mishnah Berurah defines as either kachatzi bishel, either it was cooked really halfway, v'yesh armim kishlish bishel, somebody say it's even less than half cooked, it's only a third of the way cooked. But this is food that's minimally cooked to the point of basic edibility. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you know what Chananya holds? Murter lahashoisa al gabe kira. You're allowed to put it onto the fire on Erev Shabbos and allow it to stay on the fire on Shabbos. Afilu im eina grufa min hagacholim. Even if the tanur, the kira that we're talking about, has coals in it. You did not sweep the coals out. Grufa means to shovel out or sweep out the coals. Now, I introduced to you in the Hakdamah to the Shir the problem that we're dealing with here, which is the shiloh of Shema Yechote Begacholim. What's the potential problem of Shehiyah? What's the problem of putting food on the fire in Erev Shabbos and allowing it to cook on Shabbos? It's not a problem really, a basic problem of the malacha of Bishul, Siman Reish and Beis. You could put it on the fire and let it cook on Shabbos. The problem is the gzeira shema yechote begacholim. You might stoke the coals. Well, if the oven is gerufa, if it's shoveled out and swept out of coals, guess what? There can't be a gzeira shema yechote begacholim. There are no gecholim. There's nothing to stoke. So Chananya says like this. Chananya says, if you're dealing with a kira, afilu em eina gerufa min a gecholim, even if it's not swept out from the coals, ve'ena kituma, or the coals are not kituma. Kata means they're covered. He says this in the brackets. Hainu shemechusa hagecholim be'efer, which means that you threw ashes over the coals. That's another way of avoiding the gzeira shema yechote. You see, grufa, you can't do yechote. You can't stoke them. There's nothing to stoke. Kituma is when you throw ash over the coals. If you throw ash over the coals before Shabbos starts, we're not worried anymore, Shema Yechote Begacholim, that you might come to stoke the coals. You know why? Because when you threw ash over the coals, you did a pu'ula, you did a maisa, that shows that you don't mind if the gecholim cool down. You actively went and cooled them down. You threw ash on top of them. Now we're not worried anymore. Shema Yechote Begacholim. So what does Chananya say over here? Chananya is being very makel when it comes to the shiloh of Shehiyah. What Chananya holds is like this. The shiloh of Shehiyah, yes, there is a gzeira of Shema Yechote Begacholim. But if the food is already cooked, Kemichael ben Drusai, if the food is cooked to the extent that it's already basically edible, it's a third of the way cooked, or it's a halfway cooked, we're not worried anymore, Shema Yechote Begacholim. You know why? Because it's already cooked. If it's already cooked, we're not worried that you're going to go stoke the fire. You like it well done. You like your chicken soup when it's really good and cooked. Yes, that's true. But you also know that it's Shabbos. So if it's not cooked, then we're afraid, hey, I need my chicken soup for the Suda. I got to be Mechata Begacholim so that I have chicken soup. But if the chicken soup is cooked, basically cooked, then Chananya holds there's no room for gzera shemiyechata bagacholim. We've also introduced over here the concept of grufa uketuma. Grufa uketuma also, which we know commonly, by the way, as a blech. That's what a blech does. A blech accomplishes grufa uketuma. We'll discuss that more later on. But we've introduced the concept of grufa uketuma. When we're talking about the shail of Shehiyah, we're talking about where there is no blech. It's not grufa uketuma. If it was grufa uketuma, if there's no coals because you shoveled them out, grufa, or if it's ketuma because you threw ashes on them, we're no longer worried, shemi yechata begacholim. But says Chananya, yes, there is room for a gzera shemi yechata begacholim, but not if the food is at all cooked. If the food is cooked, even kamaycha ben drusai, there's no gzera anymore shemi yechata begacholim, and therefore there is no isser of shehiyah. That's the opinion of Chananya, a very kuladika opinion, when it comes to the application of the Isser of Shehiyah. But then we have the Chachamim. The Chachamim svirluhu, but the Chachamim hold, the Chachamim amachmir. The Chachamim svirluhu, the Chachamim hold, the Osir, that Shehiyah is Osir, im eino grufa uktuma, if we're dealing with a kira where it's not grufa uktuma, so there is coal in the oven, and you didn't throw ash over it, Eli im kein nispashel kol tzarchoi. The Chachamim hold, you want to get away of the Isser of Shehiyah by a kira that's not grufa uketuma, the food has to be mevushel kol tzarchoi. It has to be completely cooked. Not only that, but they take it a step weiter. Umitstamek veraloi. It has to be cooked to the point, not only is it mevushel kol tzarchoi, it's mitstamek viraloi. Mitstamek viraloi means that if you continue cooking it, it's going to dry out, it's going to shrivel. Mitstamek literally means it's going to shrink. Mitstamek, it's going to dry up, it's going to shrink, viraloi, and it'll be bad for it. So the food is going to get worse. It's going to lessen the quality of the food. So here we have the Isser of Shehiyah, and here we have this basic machlokes, Chananya and the Chachamim, when it comes to the Isser of Shehiyah. Chananya is mekel. Chananya says the food is minimally cooked. There's no more problem of Shehiyah, because we're not afraid shemi yechata begacholim anymore. The Chachamim say, we're worried shemi yechata begacholim until the food is cooked to the degree where it's fully cooked, and not only is it fully cooked, if it cooks more, it's getting worse. Then we say there's no room for... You're not going to be mechata begacholim if you're ruining your cholent. You're not going to be mechata begacholim if you look at it, you say, I don't know, the cholent is really dry. Oh, maybe I'll stoke the coals and I'll make it drier. No, you're not going to do that. So we have the chachamim that are machmer, and we have the chananya that is mekel. Who do we paskin like? Oh. So now we turn to a Mishnah. Now says the Chavetz Chaim like this. Ubereish parakira, very first Mishnah, Masechta Shabbos, Parakira, Lamed Vav Amud Beis, the very first Mishnah in Parakira, the Mishnah says, Kira shehisikua, a kira that you fired up, you fueled it, begefes, with gefes, which we're going to see, the Mechaber is going to say, that's the waste byproducts of olives, the olive skins, the olive pits, ube'etzim, or with firewood. These are substances that when they burn, they turn into coals. And since they turn into coals, you can have the shaila of shemi yechata begacholim. So the Mishnah says, you have a kira, you fired it up with fuel that could turn into coals. Lo yitain. You're not allowed to place a pot on the fire. Now, we don't know exactly what that means. Right? The Mishnah says, Lo yitain. You can't put a pot on the fire. Ad sheyigroif, unless you shovel it out, or until you throw ash on the coals. Katum. Now, that's what the Mishnah says. Now, we're looking to this Mishnah, and we're looking to see, can this Mishnah tell us, do we paskin like Chananya, or do we paskin like the Chachamim? But the Gemara has a very basic shaila on this Mishnah. The Gemara is not sure, is this Mishnah talking about Shehiyah? When the Mishnah says lo yitain, does that mean you can't put a pot on the fire on Erev Shabbos and leave it on the fire on Shabbos, aka Shehiyah. You can't do Shehiyah unless it's Gara Fekatum? Or is this Mishnah talking about Chazara? Maybe the Mishnah means Lo Yitain on Shabbos. Maybe on Shabbos, if you have a pot that was removed from the fire, you're not allowed to put it back. Now, if this Mishnah is talking about Shehiyah, then we could use this Mishnah to paskin like Hananya or like the Chachamim. But if it's talking about Chazara, then this Mishnah is not germane to the machlokes of Hananya and the Chachamim. So says the Mishnah Berurah, this is what the Mishnah says. Umi boya lahashas, and the Gemara in Lamed Vav on the base has this shaila. Hai lo yitain ditnan. When the Mishnah says lo yitain, rotza loimer lo yashe, does the Tana mean that you can't put a pot on this cooktop on Erev Shabbos and leave it on going into Shabbos? So the Mishnah is discussing Shehiyah. Now, if Ela im kain gara fekatum, unless the kira is shoveled out of coals or it's katum, so there's no shaila of Shem Yechatam Begacholim, is that what the Mishnah is saying? Now, let's pause for a minute. Let's say that that's what the Mishnah is saying. If the first Mishnah in Parakira is talking about Shehiyah, now, it happens to be, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't spell this out, but from the end of that Mishnah, it's clear that that Mishnah is talking about food that is at least minimally cooked. Okay, so now let's analyze this. If that Mishnah is talking about Shehiyah, so we have a Mishnah that's talking about food that is at least minimally cooked. And what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says you can't do Shehiyah unless the oven is Gara Fekatum, unless you swept out the coals or you threw ash on the coals. You can't do Shehiyah, even though the food is minimally cooked. Now, who is that? It's not Hananya. Hananya says once the food is minimally cooked, there is no Isser of Shehiyah, because there's no room for Erev Shabbos anymore, because the food is already cooked. So that Mishnah wouldn't be Hananya. That Mishnah would have to be the Machmir opinion of the Chachamim, who say that there is an Isser of Shehiyah, even by food that is basically cooked. The Chachamim say there's an Isser of Shehiyah until the food is totally cooked, right? Mavasha called Tzarchai and Mitztamik Varaloi. So if this Mishnah in the beginning of Kira is talking about Shehiyah, and it's dealing with food that's at least basically cooked, then this Mishnah is telling us that we paskin like the Chachamim. So says the Mishnah Berurah inside. The Mishnah Berurah says, Umi boya lahashas, hai lo yite ditran, rotza loimer lo yashe. Is the Mishnah talking about Shehiyah? Ela im ken gar fekatim va'asya karabanan de Hananya. And that means that this Mishnah is pasking l'chomer like the Chachamim. Or maybe lo yitein rotza loimer lo yachsir. Or maybe that Mishnah is not talking about Shehiyah. It's talking about Chazara. It's talking about a pot that was removed from the fire on Shabbos, and it's talking about putting it back. In that case, it's not germane to our shaila. Alva Shehiyah, but Shehiyah, maybe muteres afilu eina gar fekatum v'asya kechananya. If that Mishnah is talking about Chazara, like I told you at the beginning of the Shir, the Hakdama, Chazara is much more chomer than Shehiyah. Chazara is putting something back on the fire on Shabbos. So if that Mishnah is talking about Chazara, so maybe Chazara is very chomer. Chazara you can't do unless the kira is gara fekatum. But Shehiyah, maybe Shehiyah you could do. Maybe the Mishnah is paskins like Hananya when it comes to Shehiyah. And as long as the food is very basically cooked, maybe you're allowed to do Shehiyah. That's the Gemara Shaila. V'lo yivshita hai baya. And guess what? It's in Yibaya de lo yivshita. The Gemara does not tell us conclusively what this Mishnah is talking about. So what do we do now? So says the Mishnah Berurah. Now it boils down to a machlokes rishonim. Upasku harif v'harambam v'ha'oindim b'shitasam. The Rif and the Rambam and those who agreed to the Rif and the Rambam, they say lishhois tanan. The Mishnah is talking about Shehiyah. Ukirabanon dechananya. And therefore this Mishnah comes out, is paskening like the Chachamim, who are machmir and argue on Hananya. That for Shehiyah, you either need that the oven has to be grufa uktuma, it has to be shoveled out of coals, or you have to have banked the coals with ash before Shabbos, or the food that you want to put on has to be mavushal called tzarchai and mitztamik varaloi. That's the sheet of the Rambam and the Rif and those who agree with them. But Tosfos and Rashi as well, pasku lahachzir tanan. They paskin that the Mishnah is talking about Chazara. Avalishois, but when it comes to Shahiya, they're mekel. They paskin like Hananya. They say afilu mutter afilu al ena grufa. You could do Shahiya on a kira, even if it has coals in it, it's not swept out, as long as Mishin is Pashul Kamichael Ben Drusai, as long as the food is basically minimally cooked, the Kechananya. They paskin like Hananya. Vehein hashtei deoi shehuvu b'shulchan aruch b'simin zeh. And this machloikis, the Rambam and the Rif, Tosfos and Rashi, do we paskin like Hananya, and are we mekel by Shahiya? And if we're dealing with kira, that's not garu fekatum. As long as the food is basically cooked, you could do Shahiya, because we're not worried anymore, shemiyachatum b'gechalim, because the food is edible. Or do we paskin like the Rambam and the Rif, and we paskin like the Chachamim, who are machmir, and hold, the kira is not garu fekatum, it has coals in it, you can't do Shahiya unless the food is mavushal called sarchai, and mitztamik varaloi. There we shiny he das a Rif Rambam. The first opinion in the Shulchan Aruch that we're going to see today represents the sheet of the Rif of the Rambam. The Yesh Oimrim that Mirza Hashem will see tomorrow. Who das Rashi v'Tosfos anal. That's the sheet of Rashi and Tosfos. Zeu ma shebiyarnu b'ktsara. This is what we have explained in short. Now we could dive into the Shulchan Aruch and we could explain the Shulchan Aruch as we move along. Okay. Baruch Hashem, 36 minutes into the shir, that represents really the difficult, complex part of the shir. Now let's move on and try to finish today's Dirshu page. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Kira. You have a kira. What's a kira? So the Mechaber first goes to define a kira. Kira shi asuya kikidera. A kira, which is basically like an inverted pot. Imagine a very big pot that's turned over. And inside it, you put the coals. That's where the fuel goes. Maybe it has a door cut in the side where you could put in your flammable material. That's the fuel for the fire. V'shoifsin al piha kidera lamayla. And now, when you want to cook, you take a pot and you put it on top, right? It's an inverted pot. So the bottom of the pot is facing up. So you have a surface and openings on top. You have openings on top that you could put a pot on. Now, by Akira, says the Mechaber, so v'shoifsin al pia kidera lamayla, you could put a pot on top. V'yesh ba mekoim shvisas shtei kideros. Akira, back in the day, was a type of cooking utensil where the fuel went inside, and on top there were two burners, so to speak. They're not really burners, they're openings so that the heat from the oven comes up, and you could put two pots on top of this kidera. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Says the Mechaber, Im huska begefes. If you're fueling this kira using gefes, what's gefes? Not Gemara Rashi Tosfos. What's gefes? Says the Mechaber, she psoilus shalzesim, which are the waste byproducts of olives, the skins, the pits, the stems, etc. Oy be'etzim, or with firewood. These are substances that as they burn, they turn into coals. And since they turn into coals, it's shaykh to have the gzera of shemiyachata begachalim. Aser litein aleh tafshil miba'od yom. The Mechaber says, you're not allowed to put food on top of this kira on Erev Shabbos, miba'od yom. You're not allowed to put it on, miba'od yom, lahashoisay aleha, intending to leave it on there going into Shabbos. Ele imkein nispashal kol tzarchai, unless the food that you're putting on is completely cooked, v'hu mitztamik, and it will be, if it cooks more, it's going to be mitztamik. What does that mean, says the Rama? Pirush, hoilich v'chaser. It's going to go and shrink. So it's going to shrivel, it's going to dry up and shrivel, v'raloi, and that will denigrate the quality of the food. Delekalamecha shemiyachata, because then there's no room for gzera, shemiyachata. So what did the Mechaber say? The Mechaber said, Shitas, Rambam, and the Rif, you want to do Shahiya. You want to put your chicken soup on the fire, Erev Shabbos. You want to leave it there going into Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, you can't do that. If you're fueling your fire with gefes or eitzim, so that stuff that turns into coals, now there's a risk shemi yichata begacholim. What has to happen in order for there to be no risk of shemi yichata begacholim? Well, he's paskening like the Rambam and the Rif, who paskin like the Chachamim. So the only way we get out of shemi yichata begacholim is either that it's gorah fekatum, which the Mechaber didn't mention yet, that's going to be in tomorrow's shir, or the food that you're putting on is mevushal kol tzarchai, it's completely cooked, and not only is it completely cooked, mitztamik veraloi. If you were to leave it on the fire, it would shrivel up and get worse. Then there's no gzera of shemi yichata begacholim. Now, the Mechaber mentions another way out. Top line, chaf amud beis, oi שהייה חי. Or you're talking about mamish raw food, shaloin is pashal klal. Or you're putting this food on the fire right before Shabbos, and it's completely raw. You're putting up your cholent, you're putting up your chicken soup right before Shabbos. You threw in a raw piece of chicken a minute, 2 minutes before Shkia. Then we're also not worried. Shemi yichata begacholim. Why? The keven shu chai, because since it's raw, mesiach daita mimena ad lamocher. I don't want to use the example of chicken soup. Let's take that away. Let's pretend I didn't say chicken soup. Cholent. You put in the cholent, you put raw meat into the cholent right before Shabbos. Since it's raw, your mind is removed from it. You don't have a havamina to eat it Friday night. And by tomorrow it'll be cooked, even if you're not mechata begacholim. So there's no shiloh of shemi yichata begacholim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph. First, the Mechaber defined for us a kira, and he said the kira has place on top to put a pot to cook. V'shoivsin al piha. Points out the Mishnah Berurah that really the kira was a cooking implement where not only would they put pots on top, they would also sometimes put a pot inside together with the fuel. They would put it inside. So imagine the inside is the oven, the top is the cooktop. So sometimes they would take a pot, they would put it inside the oven. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even though the Mechaber right now is addressing the question of putting pots on top, we really have the same shiloh of putting pots inside. You could put a pot inside too. And the halacha is umutar lahashois b'mitztamik v'raloi. If the food is mavushal kol tzarchai, and it's mitztamik v'raloi, you would be allowed to put the pot inside also on Erev Shabbos and leave it there on Shabbos. The reason the Mechaber chose to discuss the pot on top is to point out to me that even on top, which is less of a shiloh than inside, you would think, because it's not as hot on top as it is inside, even on top, if the food is mitztamek v'yofeloi, if the food will still get better by continuing to cook, you're not allowed to do shehiya on top either. Not only inside you can't do shehiya, on top you also can't do shehiya. Ois Katan Beis imuhuska. The Mechaber said this shiloh of shehiya is germane to when you're fueling your kira with gefes or eitzim. Why? Mishum dechalhani avdi gecholim, because these turn into coal. V'chayshin and shemi yichata behem. So there's a basic problem of shemi yichata begacholim. If you're using a fuel that doesn't turn into coals, there can't be a shiloh of shemi yichata begacholim. Ois Katan Gimel, the Mechaber said, what is gefes? Sheep pseil shel zeisim. It's the waste byproducts of olives. V'yesh oimrim duadin pseil shel shum shemin. It could also be, some say it could also be the waste byproducts of sesame. The gam heim b'chal gefes aniskar b'mishnah. The Mishnah refers to that as gefes as well. Ukid l'kabam b'sivin reish on zayin siv gimel inyan hatamana. Ois Katan Dalet oy be'eitzim, or you fueled it with wood. V'uadin pechamin, or coals, charcoal. Ugalolei behem agasa, or the dung of large animals, like the dung of a cow. Those are big cow patties or horse patties. They would use that as fuel as well. Ois Katan Hey, litain oleha. The Mechaber said, if you have a kira that you're fueling with substances that turn into coal, you're not allowed to put the pot on the fire on Erev Shabbos and do shehiya and allow it to remain there on Shabbos because of the shiloh of shehiya. Okay, but the words of the Mechaber were, you're not allowed to put the pot on. Well, how about if it's b'di'evid? How about if you already put the pot on? So you realized on Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, oh, wait a second, I wasn't allowed to put it on. I'm not allowed to do shehiya, but it's already on. I'm not going to put it on. Maybe b'di'evid, could I walk away now? and allow the pot to stay there going into Shabbos? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Liten alev, hu adin, im nosun, if you already put it on the fire on Erev Shabbos, tzarech lesalik, kishegiya zman chashecha, you got to take it off before Shabbos. Im loinus bashla kol tzarcha, oishem mitztaku v'yafaloi. If it's not fully cooked, or even if it is fully cooked, if it's mitztamek v'yafaloi, or it's still going to get better by continuing to cook. Ois cotton vav, mi ba'oid yoim. You're not allowed to put it on Erev Shabbos. Hainu, litnoi kainim shkias achamala shoysi alel tzarech halayla. You're not allowed to put the food on the fire in Erev Shabbos to allow it to stay there so that the food should be ready to eat on Friday night. Now, there's a beautiful biur halacha over here, Dibra Mascha lahashoysa aleha, where he talks about this litzarech halayla. I don't have time to go into it now. We'll see if we could maybe get to it in a later share. But I would point out to you, it's kedai to look at biur halacha dibra mascha lahashoysa aleha. Ois cotton zayin. You're not allowed to do shahiya, ele im kain nispashal, unless the food is completely cooked. Hainu, tekevin shekvar nispashal legamri, if it's completely cooked, if it's mavushal kol tzarchay, ad she'im tispashal yoiser, to the degree where if it continues to cook, titstamek l'ra, it will shrivel and get worse, then loy chayshina lechitoi. Then we're not worried about shemi yachata begecholim. We're not afraid that you're going to stoke the coals to ruin your food. Mutter litna az lechatchila. Then shahiya would be mutter even lechatchila. Ois cotton ches mitztamek v'raloi. What do these words mean? Says the Chofetz Chaim Pirush. Kol davar she'adam otzev kisheyavash v'niskavetz machmas roiv habishol. Any time where somebody is going to be upset, she'adam otzev, he's going to be upset if it's drying out and it's shriveling due to the high degree of cooking. That's what mitztamek v'raloi means. Sometimes you come home Shabbos morning, you realize you didn't put enough liquid in the cholent. You look at the cholent and you're like, oh boy, this cholent is drying out. Like, I hope I'm still going to have a cholent. That's mitztamek v'raloi. Sometimes you come home, you look at the cholent, some people like a cholent that's nice and thick and cooked in. So now you look at it, there's still liquid bubbling over there, and you're like, I hope it dries out more before the Suda. That's mitztamek v'yafaloi. There you have a beautiful example of mitztamek v'yafaloi, mitztamek v'raloi. V'chein b'yafaloi. What does mitztamek v'yafaloi mean, says the Mishnah Berurah? Hainu shu samech mizeh. He's happy that it's drying out. Ois cotton test, turning to chafam and beis. Ois shahiya chai. Or the other case that the Mechaber said, where you get out of the problem of shemi yachata begecholim, is if you put up raw food right before Shabbos. If you put up raw food right before Shabbos, we're not worried shemi yachata begecholim. You know why? Because he gave up on it. If you're putting up raw food right before Shabbos, you're not expecting to eat it Friday night anymore. So then there's no concern of shemi yachata begecholim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but understand, v'davka basar chai, this means raw meat. Where it's not going to be ready for the night Suda. But things that get cooked very, very quickly, it doesn't help if you put it in raw right before Shabbos, because you're not Mesiach Das. What we're going to talk about later, throwing in a raw piece right before Shabbos, it means something that you're going to be Mesiach Das from it. It means a piece of meat that now you're going to be Mesiach Das, that it's not going to be ready, so there's going to be no point in shemi yachata begecholim. I hope we're going to talk about some interesting shilas. What if you're not really Mesiach Das because you want to have a Friday night cholent and you want to eat it a little bit later Friday night? Yeah, I'm Mesiach Das because I know it won't be ready for the Suda, but maybe it'll be ready for the Einik. So maybe there's a problem of shemi yachata for the Einik. We'll get to that. Ois cotton yud shaloin is partial. The words of the Mechaber were, if you have something that's raw, and the Mechaber said, "Vos haste raw." What do I mean raw? Shaloin is partial klal. It's not cooked at all. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Shaloin is partial pirish. What that means is, oz shari litnoi samach l'shkia mamish. If it's something that's mamish raw, you could put it in right before shkia, and you could do shia. Avlu nisanai mi ba'od yom. But what if you put a raw piece of meat in an hour and a half before shkia? Aser. That's going to be also to do shahiya. Tekvar nispashal k'tzas kaidim Shabbos. Because now you created a situation where it's somewhat cooked before Shabbos, but not cooked enough. Then you have the problem of Erev Shabbos yachata begecholim. V'tzarch l'salik yeshiyas b'an Shabbos. Then you would be mechuyev to take it off the fire before Shabbos. unless it reaches the point of Mavushal Kol Sarchai or Mitztamak Varaloi before Shabbos. Ois Katan Yod Aleph, the Mechaber said, it has to be Shalonis Pashel Klal. It's not cooked at all. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it doesn't mean that it's not hot. Could be that it is hot. That's okay. Because hot could still be completely raw, right? You put in a raw piece of meat, it didn't boil yet, the water. The meat might already be starting to get hot, but it's still raw. If you threw in a piece of meat into the cholent 10 minutes before the Zman, and now when the Zman comes, it's already starting to get hot, that's okay. It's mutter to do Shehiyah now and leave it on the fire. Why? Because it's still raw. For Lagazvin and Shabiyachata, we're not going to make Xer Shabiyachata Begecholim, Kevin the Etzem Abishal, Loinus Pashal Klal. Because as far as cooking is concerned, it's not cooked at all, and therefore we're not going to be Geyser Shema Yechata Begecholim. Okay, Chazal say Kalas Chalas Kashas, all beginnings are difficult. We've begun the sugya of Bishul. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The discussion of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu should send Yeshua's, Refuah's, Panasit, Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be Zeicher to see the Bias Kal Tzedek. B'meherav Yameinu Amen. Be well.